Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us. And a very warm welcome to this Every Cloud event in partnership with Netscope. I do hope you all had an early night last night and went to bed really excited about the fact you're going to learn a little bit more about SASE this morning, or Secure Access Service Edge, which is a term coined by Gartner a couple of years ago in the InfoSec arena. And obviously this morning you'll have woken up really excited about the fact you're going to learn where you are on your SASE journey. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Rob Mukherjee. I'm the Director of Transformation at Every Cloud, and I'm delighted to be sharing hosting duties this morning with Andy Applin, who's the Director of Sales Engineering at Netscope. And we are also joined by Jack Miller from UE Coffee Roasters, who will be showing you how to brew the perfect cup of coffee. And we do want this to feel a relaxed and informal event, so please do feel free to interact with us, ask questions, use the chat facility if you'd like to make any comments, etc. So for anyone new to Every Cloud, just very quickly, we're a cloud security and cloud communications business. And our purpose in life really is to help people work anywhere securely. And we do this for businesses ranging from global financial services companies like BDO, hospitality and entertainment businesses like Odeon Cinemas, a couple of hotel chains we have. We've got law firms, travel companies, manufacturing, healthcare, a couple of Premier League football clubs as well, who obviously have a lot of secure data. So we're pretty sector agnostic because, you know, who doesn't have people working remotely and who doesn't have data they need to keep secure? And we do this, you know, this whole thing about working anywhere securely, we do it through two themes really: protect, which is all about, you know, protect, which is all about security, and then connect, which of course is all about connectivity. And today is all about that protect side, that kind of security side. And, you know, one kind of final aspect I'd make on the security side is that we work really hard in trying to help our clients get more for less, you know, helping clients find opportunities for rationalization, consolidation, to make sure you can get the optimum value from your IT spend, from your InfoSec spend. And again, we choose to work with vendors that enable us to deliver on that promise and to deliver on that opportunity to optimize, consolidate, and get the best bang for your buck, really. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a flavor of what Every Cloud do. And on that note, talking about vendors, I would like to hand over now to one such vendor that we're very privileged to work with, and that is, of course, Netscope and Andy. And just a reminder, please do feel free to pop any questions or comments in the chat. Over to you, Andy.
Great, thank you, Rob. Good morning, everybody. As Rob said, I head up the sales engineering team for Netscope. In fact, I've been here since its inception outside of North America. I've been at Netscope for 7 years, so I've had the privilege, luxury, or pain to watch it grow from a company where we would walk in the door and somebody would say net who, or you know, CAS what, cloud security what. So you know, as we go through this, as Rob said, you know, please try to make it as interactive as you like. You know, post any questions you like. I'm happy to take any questions as we go through this as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a bit of an overview around the way we see SASE. You know, SASE can be interpreted by many vendors differently, but I'll give you our interpretation of it, of which Gartner seem to favour. They see us in a very, very good light in this particular sector. So I'll go through that. Then what we're going to do is just cover off, you know, what our SASE assessment is all about. So it's a very useful tool that allows organizations just to have a think on, you know, where they are compared to the expectation. And then I was going to invite you to basically participate in the assessment yourselves. And then we can discuss, you know, what the outcome of that assessment is going to tell you. And then I'll be handing back over to our coffee specialists, of course. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen and say I've got a presentation to just walk you through. So it's not too onersome, but it is about SASE, you know, and it is what, you know, what is your SASE architecture missing today, perhaps? You know, it's something that many organizations are starting to see as a framework to move forward. So when we think about SASE, you know, everything that we do as people today is interacting with some type of service, you know, some type of application. You know, log on first thing in the morning. You might be browsing to a website, you know, to see the results from last night, of course, which we're all delighted about, unless of course you're Danish, and then you'd be less delighted. But you know, we're going to be using, you know, many different applications. You know, we'll log on to our email, we'll log on to messaging, we'll be downloading documents, uploading documents, editing online processes. So everything that we do, you know, is about us and these applications. But what we've seen is that the way in which we access those applications has clearly changed, and the choice of applications has also widened as well. You know, we can be working remotely, and we mostly do at the moment, of course. And then, you know, we can go back into offices, you know, next week, week after next, you know, so we'll have those choices again as well. But what we've seen is that because of this move of our applications that we access that are, you know, outside the perimeter, I'm not going to repeat a story that you've probably heard a million times, but they are outside of the perimeter now. What we know is that to access them, you know, there are many different routes that our connectivity can take, from being, you know, the remote user or being the on-prem user, and the services that we're going to access, okay, can be in many different disciplines. They could be in AWS, they could be public cloud service. And what we've seen is, to govern that, the technology choices that we've used in the past are quite, you know, there's a lot of them. You know, if we want to think about access control, yeah, we would typically think about firewalls, our perimeter. If we wanted to do checking of genre mapping, you know, for acceptable use policies, we would be looking at things like secure web gateways. If we want to go deeper into what's happening in the internet, then we have to do SSL decryption. You know, when we do that SSL decryption, you know, if we're looking at a cloud service, we typically want to look at a CASB function to ensure that we've got complete visibility there. And then when we do dive into those apps, you know, whether we're looking at threats through scanning things such as our sandbox, or whether we be looking at, you know, to identify the different contents being uploaded, we'd be looking at DLP solutions. And until SASE, you know, these platforms were always considered disparate. You know, they were a choice of technology that an organization could take, and they would be, you know, aligned, if you like, in some type of serial chaining to say it's going to go through the firewall, it's going to go through the proxy, it's going to go through the DLP engine, but they were all separated. And the problem is because we've got distributed users, distributed applications, it's now a case of, well, how do we fit this into our security model to get the most efficient way of using this? And the right way to do it, of course, would be to rationalize it. You know, not to have these disparate platforms all over the network and in services. It would be to take them and put them as a single function. And effectively, that's what SASE gives us, is this single architecture that aligns all of those capabilities. So as an organization, as a user, you know, there's only one place that you will transit through. You know, you won't have to backhaul your traffic, split your traffic, you know, reroute services to get a function. You know, you should be able to put them through one edge infrastructure, and the edge infrastructure should be easy for you to connect to. And when you connect to it, you should have an optimal user experience. We know that applying security controls may have an impact on performance. So we want to minimize that by ensuring you have the best possible connectivity. And all of those services, you know, the access control, the secure web gateway, the VPN replacement services with zero trust networking, the data inspection with DLP, all of those should be combined into a single platform. And what we see is that SASE, you know, has come to the forefront to give us that consolidation of, you know, bringing together multiple disciplines in a single architecture, so that we simplify the deployment, we reduce costs, we optimize the management of the platform, and we optimize the user experience. So this is effectively what we're looking to do with SASE. Now, in doing this, you know, this is naturally where Netscope sits. You know, we came to market, say, 8 years ago now, and our purpose was to provide, you know, protection of cloud services, because at that moment in time, that was the ungoverned, the unprotected resource that was emerging on the internet. And so we were a natural fit, to expand our capabilities into these other disciplines as organizations started to adopt, remote working, the opportunity to simplify your network connectivity, and also then to build out, the depth of security that you would need. But in doing so, do it in the most, simplest approach, with one platform rather than several products. So this is what SASE looks like to the world today. Now, what I would like to do now, though, is for you, if you like, in parallel with me, to go to our SASE assessment page. So I think Liz is putting the assessment link in the chat room. So if you go to the chat, you should see that it is in there. And what we want to do is I want to walk you through what the SASE assessment is all about. So this is the landing page that you should go to. So this is not an overly complex way of trying to do a full security audit. The object of this is to provide you with a way of identifying where perhaps you are on the journey, what may be missing, and which direction you may want to go next. So what I'll do is I'll walk through this, and you're welcome to walk through this in parallel with me. And then at the end of it, what you'll have is you will have a SASE assessment, and that SASE assessment will give you some level of guidance as to perhaps the next steps that you may want to consider. So let's start this off. So the first thing we ask here is about securing web access. If I go back in my career, I was at Bluecoat very, very early on, when Bluecoat was actually called Cashflow. And I remember, the purpose of securing web access was the fact that a firewall had port 80 open to the internet. So anybody with a web browser could go to any site, and we had to have a way of curtailing that open behavior. And so, a web proxy was there to actually give us that. So the first question, of course, is, do you have a web proxy? And, have we a cloud-based proxy, or do you have a platform that's still on-prem? So these are the choices you make. So you may have already moved to the cloud and selected a cloud proxy to provide your URL filtering, or you could have, an appliance currently located within your infrastructure that your users will go through. So this is seen as one of the core foundations of what you're going to look at as you move forward, where you want to actually do that processing of your web access. The next thing we want to look at, though, is about securing that web access. Today, if I was to take a scan of traffic across the internet, I would know that there's going to be over 90% of the traffic that traverses the internet is going to be encrypted. So it's going to be SSL protected, TLS, SSL, it's going to be encrypted so that nobody can snoop on what you're doing. Now, that's a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing from the perspective of, if I'm going to my online banking, I want that to be the case. But, the platforms that we have developed today, can differentiate between what should and should not be encrypted and also decrypted. But if you don't decrypt your traffic today, then what you'll find is that you're going to have a huge hole in visibility of what your users are doing, particularly when it comes to cloud services. Because if I go to Office 365 or I go to Box or Dropbox, if I don't decrypt it, then my users can be using it for any type of data movement and potentially any threat. So to protect your users, we should be decrypting it. So do we decrypt it or do we not decrypt it? So I answered previously that I've got an on-prem solution, but I am decrypting it with my on-prem solution, so I can make that next choice. The next thing is remote workers. We know that we were all forced to go home, of course, last year. That presented some challenges, some greater challenges for some organizations, but a lot of organizations will, of course, already have had some type of VPN service. Normally, it would be a backhaul service into your existing enterprise infrastructure. such as a VPN concentrator, and that would allow your users to connect to their network. And when we say network, it literally means, I've got access back into my corporate network. And so I can map a file share, I can map any resource there. So it's quite open. And because it was so open, many organizations wanted to put more controls in place. So another framework has appeared, if you like, that is a component of SASE, and that's zero trust networking. So with zero trust access, it is basically saying, how precise are we going to be with this remote access? So are you using, some type of zero trust model, or are you using a traditional VPN concentrator? Okay, so hopefully this is all starting to sort of resonate with what you're familiar with your working today. So managing use of the cloud. There was a term that really started to appear about 5 or 6 years ago, and that was shadow IT. Until that time, it was like, well, what is this shadow IT? And basically, if your users are using the internet, whilst you will have probably granted them access to an approved application for collaboration and sharing. Maybe it's Office 365, maybe it's G Suite, maybe it's Slack. There may be other platforms out there. But outside of that, we know that the people will be using other services as well. It will be dictated by the organizations they interact with, third-party organizations. That may just be because they like using this particular application. So those applications that are deemed as unmanaged are also a security threat, because your users may unwittingly or decisively be using it to put your company data there. So what we need to understand is, are you managing those shadow IT services? If your user logs into Office 365, they take one of your corporate documents, they download it to their secure endpoint machine. That's all good because it's going from your approved application to your approved device. If they then send it off into the ether to some unapproved application, that could be a big data breach. There could be an exploitation there happening. So do you have control here? So are you in complete control, or do you suspect that there's shadow IT being used? So I'm going to go for I suspect there's shadow IT being used. Then what we've got is managing the use of cloud. So here, where we have got managed cloud applications available to us, I say, if I go back when I first started at Netscope, Office 365 was just coming to the forefront. It seems a long, long time ago, but it's not. It's only sort of 5 or 6 years ago that organizations were just starting to trial 365. Microsoft obviously dictated, I'm no longer going to sell you a Windows 2000 server or 2020 server or whatever server version they wanted, and you can't run Exchange on it on-prem any longer, and you can't run SharePoint on-prem. You're going to have to use this in our own infrastructure. That is obviously now a fact of working. We will use a SaaS environment. So software as a service is absolutely a daily part of our life. So these managed cloud applications are absolutely there. So now you're using these managed services, whether it be Salesforce, Workday, ServiceNow, maybe G Suite. Each of those potentially will hold your data. And if it's holding your data, you need to be ensured that you've got control of access to it, data movement from it, notification of sharing of your information, and also perhaps a catalog of what is hosted in those applications. So a summary of the data and the configuration of setup. So here, what we want to know is, do you have control of access to your applications? Do you allow applications from unmanaged devices, or are you only allowing them to corporate devices? So in most cases, people want to have flexibility, but in giving flexibility, you perhaps lose control. So you have to ask a choice here. Is 365 allowed from corporate devices only, or are you basically opening it up for non-corporate devices as well? So for flexibility, I'm going to go for non-corporate devices as well. And then once we have given access to these applications, do we know what people are doing with the data? So in order to actually know what data is being used, you have to measure it. So I've got fortunate opportunity to work right across EMEA and LATAM. And I know that within different geographies, we have different regulations that data is governed by. We have GDPR, of course, across Europe. There's the POPI directive in South Africa. There's other directives in Latin America, but they do all one thing, is they allow an organization to be governed and abide by a set of rules to protect data. Now, that's when we talk about compliance, but equally, there's just intellectual data protection. Organizations like Rolls-Royce use Netscope, and it's, of course, to protect their data. Airbus, the aircraft manufacturer, use Netscope to protect their data. So are you currently aware of the actual data? Do you have DLP in place today? Are you, basically looking at that data? So we've got a choice again here. Do you have DLP in place or not? Or do you think that your current solution inspects content and does block sensitive data? A lot of the time we find that most organizations don't have DLP in place, and it's a best efforts to look on the endpoint potentially and at the email gateway only to look at data, rather than what is actually going to and from those cloud services. So when we talk about data protection, what we also need to understand is, because of a SASE architecture, we're not just looking at data in transit, data being inspected in the gateway. What we're also looking at is data already resident in the cloud. So you've adopted a service like G Drive, and you've put your data in it, and you've used that as your data store, perhaps, or even something like AWS. You could be putting data in, to some type of S3 bucket there, or Azure in the blob storage. Do you know, whether or not that data is secure, even though it's in your cloud applications? Because it's really simple, to right click on a folder, take it as share it publicly, and all of a sudden, you send that link to a third party, say, I've just shared this document with you. And all of a sudden the world has access to your documents, because it's not a share to an individual, it's a public share that's been set up. So what we have to ensure is that you have governance in place to ensure the data protection of your data at rest as well as in transit. And this question asks us that, do you not allow external sharing of files in your managed share application, or do you allow it ungoverned? And most organizations will allow it, but perhaps without the controls in place to ensure the sensitive data is not being shared unnecessarily. And then the next piece is, the catch-all, if you like, threat protection. When we founded Netscope, it was very much on the principle of access control, allowing users to go where they should go. It would be data protection to ensure that we knew what people were doing with data, and then of course threat protection. And cloud threats differ from endpoint threats. We've got great partnerships with CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, Carbon Black, where we do an exchange of IOCs with them. But threat protection for the cloud is very different, because you're looking at change of state of objects. So ransomware attacks are typically targeted at the cloud, and there's obviously been a lot of publicity about that. So do you measure threat today? And when you do it, are you using your existing internet gateways to look at your cloud threats, or are you depending on an endpoint solution? So are you looking at this in real time with the traffic going to and from your cloud, or are you just reliant upon your endpoint? So here, you may well be comfortable with just using endpoint protection rather than using the gateway to look at real time. So we can select this. And then the ecosystem integration. We don't fit all use cases for every customer. what we want to do is to ensure that we give you seamless integration. We're not an identity management platform. People like Okta do that way better than we can ever do that, or Ping, or Azure AD. And what we need to therefore do is integrate into those solutions. We do identification, not authentication. So have you simplified your use of ecosystem integration by integrating into an SSO, or have your users a various different number of different authentication platforms, so they have to have maybe a spreadsheet to track what their credentials are? So most organizations now perhaps have gone down the SSO road, but this is a component piece that maps into the SASE model. And then network transformation. We've got to get that data, or we've got to get the connectivity established here. So what we know is that it's easier for users to get the best user experience by taking the shortest path. So it's all about, removing what was the hub and spoke networking architecture that we'd previously used, where everything had to be tromboned back into your infrastructure to utilize the security stack. So we've got two questions here. Are home workers and branch offices going directly to the internet without backhauling, which would be a preferred methodology? It alleviates workload on your infrastructure, and it gives your users a better experience. Or are your home workers and branch offices mostly accessing internet through your own data centers? So are you effectively backhauling? We as Netscope, we certainly go direct to net, so we benefit from better user experience without backhauling. Now, I've gone through that, and I've got a score low here. So what I want to do now is just share with you, going back to my presentation, what we mean by these score values. So what is it by meaning if I've got a low score versus a medium score versus a high score? So if it's a low score, what it means is that I need to look at going to a cloud native security web gateway as my next step, because that's probably a step that I haven't done so far. And I answered, of course, at the beginning of that assessment that I've got an on-prem proxy still. And I know that means backhauling all my traffic there. It probably doesn't do SSL decryption that well. It won't do it at scale because it hasn't got the performance there. So I'm probably looking to do a replacement and provide a web security gateway. I will probably want to make sure that I secure my remote workers better rather than using my legacy VPN solution. I'll be probably better off going now into a zero trust model so that I have got specific application control. And I would also benefit from ensuring that when my users are using Shadow IT, I'm going to safely enable them by doing inline protection of cloud services as well. When I get to my medium environment, I'm probably got some of those pieces in place already. I may well have a cloud proxy. I may well have some of the VPN services in place, but I want to make sure I optimize that. So let's make sure those ecosystems are integrated. Let's complete the architecture transformation. So I'm moving away from the hub and spoke architecture. I may still have that in place because I'm backhauling some of my traffic for some of those functions, maybe DLP. And then the last piece is I want to make sure that if I am using DLP, I use it in the right place in the cloud, make it contextual. Don't just look at the objects, look at the fact that somebody may be downloading a sensitive data from my cloud app and putting it into Shadow IT. So that was all I wanted to go through. So you should potentially have the option now to have gone in, fill in your credentials, and then maybe you've already got it. You may have a report to download. So any questions from anybody at the moment? I'm going to stop sharing for a sec. Hopefully that's made sense.
Thank you, Andy. That was brilliant. If you do have any questions, of course, please feel free to put them either in the chat or the Q&A, or indeed raise your hand if you would like. If you don't have any right now, you can put them in right at the end of the session, or obviously, please do get in touch afterwards if you look at your report and if you have any questions about it. And one of my colleagues, actually, James, will be in touch with you anyway, just to follow up on your report, help you understand it in the way that Andy's helped understand some of those, example scenarios there, but it can help you actually directly understand your specific report and how you can address that where you're on your SASE journey, if you need to start in your SASE journey, etc., etc. So I can't see any questions at the moment, Andy. So what we'll do, we'll crack on, and I will, on that point, hand over to Jack, please.
This is going to be way more enjoyable, this bit.
I don't know. Thanks, Rob, and thanks, Andy. That was actually really interesting. For me, it's like a little window into the world of cloud security that I wouldn't otherwise have. But now I'd like to offer you a little window into the world of coffee that you may not otherwise kind of be looking into. So firstly, I wanted to go through what you get in your box. Some of you may have opened it already. If not, you can start unpacking it now along with me. And then tell you a little bit about UE Coffee and what we do over in Oxfordshire. And we'll brew some coffee and have a nice coffee to drink at the end of it. So with your pack, hopefully everyone's received it. You get a little kind of shoebox size box. And in there you have your coffee brewing device. So we're going to use this to brew our coffee today. Maybe you've used one of these before, maybe not, but it is a plastic dripper. It's cone shaped, and you've got some paper filters in here as well. And we'll be using one of those, and you've got a little scoop to help you measure. I normally use scales when I'm making coffee, just so I'm ultra precise, because I want to make sure I'm getting everything just right. That might sound quite alien to a lot of people. Not many people use scales when they brew coffee, and you might think, just chuck some coffee in, chuck some water in, let it brew, and it's all good. But sometimes I refer to kind of related to baking, like if you're making a cake or a loaf of bread or something, you need to know your precise measurements, how much flour you're using, how much water you're using, how much milk, how much sugar, whatever it is you're putting in there. If you're just kind of winging it, just chucking random amounts in, it can end up in a bit of a mess. And coffee is the same. So you may find it useful, and you get good consistent results using some scales. Also in your pack, you've got a nice little Netscope branded keep cup. So I'll be brewing into this today, and you can brew into this, or you can have another mug. I've got another mug here as well that I'm just going to keep on the side, just so I can use that for kind of wastewater. In there, you also have a nice little brewing guide. So whichever brewing method you're using, a lot of people use something like a cafetiere or French press. So there's a recipe in here for using French press coffee, and it gives you just guidelines on what kind of ratio of coffee to water to use, what temperature of water, all those kind of things. So I'll kind of guide you through the brewing with your dripper today, and then if you want to look back at the brewing guide later on, that's good. You've also got a couple of little leaflets in there. This one's just about our Barista Foundation, which just tells a little bit about some of the kind of charitable work we do. And one in particular is the Elephant Valley Project in Cambodia. So we have a particular coffee that when we sell, we give some of the proceeds to this charity based in Cambodia. They rescue elephants from captivity and let them live out a nice life in a kind of protected area. Also, in your box, you have coffee, of course. And so this one that I've sent you out is the Tropical Bahia, which is the Brazilian coffee. And this one's really delicious. It's kind of exclusive, actually. It's not really readily available yet to our customers. So you've got a little bit of a secret kind of first look at this Brazilian coffee, which is quite exciting. And also, then you'll have a little biscuit with every cloud on it. Enjoy that little shortbread along with your coffee if you like. Dip it in if you like dipping it. Maybe you've eaten it already. Maybe you got your box a couple of days ago and you've already been through it, had the biscuit. Maybe you've had some of the coffee already too. That's fine. So just a little bit about this coffee. It's from Brazil. Brazil is one of the biggest producers of coffee in the world. Actually, the biggest. At one point, they were producing about 65% of the world's coffee. So it's a huge scale operation. And there's multiple levels of quality. So we're looking here at the very highest end of the quality of coffee that comes out of Brazil. A lot of the coffee goes into instant coffee or supermarket blends and things like that. But we're really focusing on high quality coffee with these kind of interesting tasting notes. So if you look on the box there, you've got a few tasting notes listed. There's pineapple, milk chocolate, almond. Sometimes people think those are things that we've added in, but they're just a natural note. A little bit like wine. Coffee is very similar to wine in the way that The terroir is really important when you're growing the coffee, like altitude, rainfall, soil type, all those kind of things really impact the flavors that you get out of the coffee. And then just when you're tasting it, these are just notes that you can pick up on as you go. There's also a little bit more information on the top of the box there. So the country, the grower, this one says 60 smallholders. So quite often in coffee, they're grown in very small plots, often people's back gardens. So up in the mountains in Brazil, there'll be a very small villages, all with very small plots of coffee, and they all contribute their coffee to this lot, and then it's all bagged up together and exported. The altitude, as you can see, is 800 to 1200. That just shows you high altitude coffee is generally accepted to be better quality because it's had longer to develop and it had a kind of cooler temperatures, develops more sweetness and more flavor complexity. And then there's a couple of other bits there which basically just refer to like the varietal is a bit like with apples, you get like Cox and Royal Gala, Pink Lady. This is like that with coffee. So Catuai is the variety we're looking at here. And the natural process basically just means they dry the coffee within its cherry. Coffee is like often referred to as cherry. It's a little red fruit, and inside that red fruit, when you break it out, you get 2 coffee beans. I've got a little sample of green coffee here, which is quite interesting to look at. So it's green in color, and it smells very raw. It's got this kind of, smells a bit like peas or kind of grassy hay-like smell. It's really nice it's got a really kind of freshness to it compared to the roasted coffee, which is obviously brown in color. This is probably more likely to see on a regular basis. And during that process, it's kind of doubled in size. It's become a lot more brittle, so you can actually grind it and brew it. These are like stones. They're absolutely rock hard, and you wouldn't be able to do anything with the green coffee. This is how we receive it at the roastery. So it comes in from Brazil to the roastery like this, and we put it through the roaster, and in about 10 to 12 minutes at kind of 185 degrees, we finish off with this nice brown roasted coffee ready to brew. Right, let's get on with brewing some coffee then, shall we? So I'm going to go into this nice Netscope Keep cup, and I've got my red brewer here. It's the same as yours, but a red one. And you can open up your paper filters. Now's actually a good time to pop the kettle on, so I'll just go and put mine on. You do the same if you haven't already. And then the only other thing I'd have is a mug on the sides and maybe a spoon as well. So while the kettle boils, we'll just set up our coffee brewing here. So you've got your cup, your dripper, and one of the paper filters. If you open that out, and just on that kind of seam, if you just fold that in a little bit, then that will fit nice and snugly just inside your brewer there. So you'll have the cone ready to receive the coffee. This coffee has been ground for you. So I normally flip it upside down so you don't have to break that seal at the top. Open it up, and you've got your bag inside full of your pre-ground coffee. So you can open this up as well. You'll have to tear off the top. I've already weighed out my coffee just there. And when I was talking before about the ratio of coffee to water and how much you should be using, it's normally about 60 grams per litre. So I'm going to be brewing, because it's a very small cup, I'm going to be brewing about 240 grams of water. So I've weighed up 15 grams here, but using your scoop, it's about 1.25 scoops for this amount. So that's 1 scoop, in it goes, and then that's about 1/4 of a scoop. And that's about the right amount for this small cup size. If you were going to be making a larger mug, you can lose a little bit more coffee. And if you were going to be making like a litre of coffee, then you could use 60 grams, and that would probably be kind of 4 or 5 scoops of the coffee there. So once your coffee's in the cone, you can just give it a little shake just to level it out. So we're going to start with a nice level bed of coffee. My kettle's just boiled, so I'm going to grab that. Hopefully yours is on the same track. And most of the time in kind of professional coffee, we use these gooseneck kettles for this kind of brewing. It's got a very long neck, so you get a very precise speed and flow of the water. But I figured you guys are probably going to be using something more similar to my home kettle, so I thought we'd do that as well. So I'm actually going to use some scales here just to weigh the amount of water I'm using. So you can judge it just by as the cup fills up. This cup is 8 ounces, which is about 230 mils. So the coffee will absorb some of the water, but we'll end up with about 220 mils in there. So I'm going to start my timer. And if you're brewing along with me, hopefully your kettle's boiled as well. First thing we can do is just pour a little bit of water on, just to get the coffee wet. So I'm just going to pour it quite slowly, just around in circles, just to let the coffee get wet. I'm going to give it a little swirl. So you should have some bubbling happening there as some of the gas releases. When coffee is roasted, it builds up a lot of CO2 in there. So the fresher the coffee, the more CO2 that you have in there. This was roasted, roast date's on the back here, so the 29th of June is on my one. So very nice and fresh, it's only a week or so old, which is ideal. And the purpose of just pouring the first bit to get the coffee wet is just to help release some of that gas, so that when we start brewing with the rest of the water, the gas isn't kind of inhibiting the contact of the water with the coffee grounds. So after about 30 to 45 seconds, you can carry on pouring. Just round in circles, nice and slowly. And I'm aiming for about 240 grams of water, and that's going to be about halfway full pouring at this speed. So we're going to fill the cone to about halfway. Just going around in circles, nice and slow. A little bit more just to get that right amount of water there. And then as the coffee begins to draw down, I'm just going to give it a little swirl, just to kind of capture all of those coffee grounds off of the side of the brewer, because you'll see they begin to cling to the edge as the coffee kind of filters through. And the whole process of this should only take about 2 minutes and 30 seconds, something like that. So as you watch, have a smell as well, smell the kind of the freshness of the coffee. And you'll see it just drawing down. Some of the coffee bed will become visible, and you'll see your cup filling up. If you're not weighing the water, you can just keep an eye on the cup below, and when that begins to get full, you can get ready to, this is part of the reason this is here, just so I can move the dripper onto the spare cup. So a couple of minutes now, it's almost finished brewing. See the last few drops just coming through. This is quite a common way of brewing coffee in cafes. You see a lot of people offering a pour over. That's what this is. It's a good way to prepare 1 cup of coffee, so it's really freshly brewed. Otherwise, you get some cafes have kind of batch brew, pre-brewed coffee, and they just kind of pour it out of the tap. It could be sitting there for a long time. This way, you know, you've got a nice fresh brew each time. And it's a bit of an artisan skill as well to be able to get a really good tasting coffee using this method. So there we go, it's finished there. So it's about 2 minutes and 30 seconds, so nice and quick. And there we have our nice Brazilian tropical coffee. Feel free to add some milk if you like. I normally drink my coffee black because I like to really try and pick up on those tasting notes. Those kind of pineapple and almond and chocolate. Hopefully you can get some of those. It smells really nice, and hopefully you enjoy drinking that as you digest your SASE presentation notes from Andy. But thank you very much for your time, and good to be here with you this morning. Back over to you, Rob.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jack. I've seen my wife's a big coffee fan, so while I'm up here in the office, my wife's actually got the box downstairs in the kitchen where she's got a bit more room, and has been following Jack along downstairs. We'll have to nip down in 10 minutes and see how she got on. But really interesting. I mean, I found it really interesting, really cathartic as well. Like you were saying, Jack, you know, you got an insight into the world of cloud security that you're unfamiliar with, and this is me sort of, you know, getting an insight into the world that I'm unfamiliar with. And I also like the reference to Cambodia as well. Had it not been for COVID, we had great plans to be in Cambodia and Vietnam last Easter, but that obviously got knocked on the head, unfortunately. But yeah, great that you're doing work there as well. So again, if there's any questions for Jack, again, you're very welcome to fire them in. I hope you did enjoy that, whether you were brewing along in real time, whether you've got a family member doing it like I have, or whether you've, you know, obviously in the box there are clear, you know, there's instructions within the box as well if you're going to, you know, follow that later on. So I hope you do enjoy that. But yeah, Jack, thank you again. So that brings us to the end of this morning's event, really. If there are no questions, I do hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found that interesting, you know, about learning about how you can sort of do a self-assessment in terms of where you are on your SASE journey and some potential steps you might take as you move along that journey. I hope you enjoyed the insight into the coffee brewing. And, you know, back to the SASE piece, when, you know, if you have completed your SASE assessment online, you should get your report and your assessment immediately, which is downloadable for you. As I mentioned, my colleague James will just do a quick follow-up with you, just to check that you're comfortable in your understanding of the results and what it means for you, and whether it can be of any assistance. So yeah, if there are no questions, we'll call it a day there, and we'll be in touch soon. Enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully come Sunday, football is coming home. So all the best and take care. Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.